everyone, and welcome to another episode of Being with the authors of Rising Relentlessly. I am so excited to be here with Michelle, one of the amazing authors who said yes to herself through writing her chapter and saying yes to getting her message out to all of you. So, Michelle, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. My name is Michele Morris. I am a nurse of very many years and an entrepreneur in the cannabis and the healthcare space. And I was very excited to be asked to share my story on this, how I got to share my story on this platform.
I love that. We are so honored that you said yes. I believe that your voice and everybody else's in this book is just really going to make a huge impact, just like we did with Rooted to Rise, but it's a little bit more elevated this time. And one thing people don't know about the process of what we do is we get to know the people before their chapters and their stories, and we come up with the titles before we even know what the stories are. And I really feel like Rising Relentlessly defines your story. And so I just love that we're going to be able to dig into your why and your yes and all of the things that brought you to this space. And so I'd love to start off by asking you what inspired you to say yes in the first place to share the story in the anthology?
I believe that people's stories make a difference. And for years, I listened to other people share their stories, very impactful stories, and learned from them and grew from them. But I never thought my story was important, that anyone would find it interesting. And oftentimes, I felt like my story might actually turn people off and maybe make people look away because it's not an uncomfortable, it can be an uncomfortable story to listen to. So um, at some point, I arrived at the idea that my story is important, and all it takes is helping one person and shifting one person's life with what you've gone through in your experience to make it worth sharing.
I love that. And the common theme I'm hearing is that a lot of times people don't feel like their story matters.
Mhm.
And every story that you read, that person felt the same way. And I really hope that the more stories we get out, especially one as empowering as yours, starts breaking that stigma. Not only are we breaking the stigma of cannabis, but we're breaking the stigma of voices around that and everything else. I mean, it's not just about cannabis. So before writing, did you have any fears or hesitations about telling your story publicly?
So many. And some of those will be very clear when people read the story. So I won't get into the specifics of it. But my concerns were that people, it's the same concerns we have in high school. Like, are people still going to like me? Are people still going to respect me for, what I've gone through? Are they going to understand, um, the challenges that I went through? Do they think that, um, I don't want to use the word worthy, but do people understand the challenges that I went through to the level that I did? Can they appreciate what it was like? Because everyone has their own mountain to climb.
Exactly. And I think that sometimes people not only are afraid to write the stories, but some people are afraid to read the stories of their
Mm.
loved ones, of their friends, of, somebody close to them, because oftentimes what we're sharing in these chapters in these books, we're sharing for the very first time in the way that we're sharing it, even if it's just like a little bit here and there. And we have to make space for people to process what we share. I know that was something that I needed to learn when I wrote my first one. So was there anything that like surprised you during the writing process that maybe it was like a aha or a huh, I didn't realize that kind of moment?
The validation that the story was worthy. That may seem the most basic thing in the world, but when you're nervous and terrified, you're not sure your story is even worth listening to, and you get the validation from other people, either hearing about your topic, not even the words of your story, but just about the topic, or even working with the editors on the actual topic and the structure of your story and how it's going to come off when people read it. Like the whole process was validating, and I really hadn't experienced that with my story up until that point. So that was a
Oh,
great surprise.
that makes my heart so happy. That's why so much of what we do before you even put pen to paper is telling people on social platforms or in other ways, like, hey, look at what I'm doing. And you get that encouragement early on before you even start writing, and people are intrigued and they want to know, what are
Mhm.
you up to? And that's really just an invitation for them to walk the journey out with you as well, not only with us, but with them. And so, with that, what was the hardest part about writing your story for you?
For me, my story encompasses over a 10-year period of time. And there were so many things going on during that period of time. Not all of it is being shared in my chapter, but chronologically trying to make my story make sense to someone who didn't live it and not include the entire thing, but and try to choose what is the most important parts that I wanted people to hear about. It was the chronology and getting it to be understandable to someone else because it's been solely inside of my head for so long that I just wanted to make sure it was clear for people. And that's why working with the editors that's what was really the most important part for me, working with the editors. I needed someone who wasn't in it to be able to look at it from an outside point of view and say, okay, that makes sense. I have no idea what that is, and we need to, reframe. I actually enjoyed that part, and once that part was complete, I felt a lot more confident in other people hearing my story because I felt like they weren't just going to be sitting there scratching their heads. Maybe they would actually get something out of it now.
I think that's what makes James and Ashley Elizabeth so unique in the developmental part of everything. I know I experienced it with my own memoir, and I was just like, how could anybody even think about it that way? But we're so stuck in our own narrative
Mm,
that, the whole purpose of getting it out for others to read, it's really important for the editors to come to that because they're the first ones reading it. And the way that they're able to just kind of pull things from us and organize things chronologically or like from an emotional standpoint, what have you, I just think is like a really huge gift that they both have. And that's what makes them so unique to work with. So,
mm.
was there anything that shifted in you? Was there like healing? Was there some questions that you asked yourself? Was there personal growth that occurred during this process?
Personal growth for sure, and that has been an ongoing thing over the past, 5, 10 years of my life. Um, just having it on paper, looking back on it and saying, I made it through that. And I really was finally feeling like sharing the story, putting it on paper, making sure it makes sense. I could now see that I was on the other side of it. And now, I'm over the mountain, even though, by no means is life easy or, a cakewalk at this point, but I can see, look at everything that's behind me, look at what I've made it through. And if I can do this, then I'm sure that I can do the other things that I want to do. And if I can do this, that means other people can get through their challenges as well.
I love that. I can't wait to read it. I'm so excited. What you touched on the support with the editing team, and I'd like to kind of elaborate on that a bit. What support with the Wildly Free team or the support of the other authors did you get that really helped you through the process?
We had like our monthly gatherings where we would talk about the writing process, but we were really just getting to know each other and the fact that we're all human beings and we all have very similar concerns about sharing our stories, about the writing process. Just being in community, that was really helpful. I tend to be a solo writer. I'm not like, I don't do well writing in groups, but the community aspect of it was helpful for me when I was ready to pull away and put my thoughts to paper. It helped me organize my thoughts. It helped me feel supported, very supported. So I feel like for people who are solo writers, there is still a place for being in community.
Yeah, and that's what we always try to balance. Like we want to give you guys your space, But I think it's also important that, especially with this book, Rooted to Rise, everybody knew each other ahead of time. Rising Relentlessly has pulled people from all over the United States and even Amsterdam. This is our, like an international book. And we needed to have that time to just kind of be in community, not necessarily to write together, but to just be human together. And I think that that's why it's so important to bring, I don't like to call them meetings, I like to call them gatherings because we're
Hmm.
gathering together to be in space. And your story is going to be with everybody else's story. So it's important that everybody kind of just, has that community feel in general. So you touched a bit about what you learned about yourself by writing this chapter. What do you hope that others will take away from your chapter from a writing standpoint and your message standpoint?
Um, I am not a trained writer by any means. So if I can sit down and put a very complicated situation to words, and I think it's pretty understandable, then hopefully anyone feels that they can do it, especially if they have a supportive group to help them get there. And that, again, that people's story matters. Like you may think like nobody is going to get any sort of nuggets or growth out of your story, but I guarantee you somebody, and probably a lot more than one somebody, needs to hear at least parts of what you've gone through, how you got through it, you know, where you gained growth from what you went through. Like since the dawn of time, that's really how we have learned from each other as human beings is storytelling. And it's still like the best way. It is still the best way to learn and to share. And so I hope by reading all the chapters, people are inspired at least to consider sharing their story, even with their small circle, because it can do so much.
Exactly. Yeah, storytelling is literally woven into our DNA. It is what makes us like human beings that are able to communicate. And before we had words, we had pictures or we had movements and motions and showing by example and all of that. And that is really like the purpose of why we love to get stories out is because we need to get back to our roots and not hide behind the shame or the perceived shame of incidences that occur in our life. Nothing is really about shame. It's supposed to be just human experience and helping others maybe not make the same mistakes or see a situation that they can relate to and make similar choices. So I think that's really important. So you talked about being in the collective book rather than writing alone. Is there anything else that you want to touch on with the experience of, this is your first book and you got to do it with other people? Why is that important, maybe for people who want to eventually write their own book, but want to start off with the community aspect?
I think it's like putting on a pair of training wheels. If you think you might want to do it, but you're overwhelmed, then try being part, doing something like this on a smaller scale. Try it on for size, see if you like it. Because doing your own book, like from never writing anything else and then writing a book, is a daunting task. I can't even imagine. But this is kind of a way to try it on for size. Highly recommend.
Oh, I love that
Um,
analogy. I
mhm.
haven't heard that one before, so thank you for that. If someone is listening and is unsure about sharing their own story, what is something you want to tell them? I know that you've brought you haven't been a writer, but is there any other aspect to that that you would love to share with them?
That it, whatever it is that you want to share, that you're worthy of sharing it and people are worthy of hearing it. And maybe you just need to put it down messy and figure out how to polish it later. Even voicing it into an app and then writing it down later, like stream of consciousness. I highly recommend that. Sometimes I do my best thinking in the car and I'll just record. Sometimes my best thinking is also in the shower, but it's harder to record in the shower. Do it messy. Don't be afraid.
I love the messiness of all of it because it's like just this renewal coming out of ashes kind of experience of rising like a phoenix and just making sure that you're letting people know that they're not alone, I think is really important.
Mhm.
So you mentioned that your story goes back 10 years. What would you tell Michelle 10 years ago, knowing what you know now, that you believe would be important for her to know?
10 years is a long time. And 10 years ago, I was rushing. Everything was like, well, I'm not going to wait that long for that. And there's no way that I'm going to take that long for this. And um, you just can't rush some things. And we spend our whole lives rushing, trying to get to something that we think, I mean, the journey, we're missing the journey. I would tell 10 years ago, myself 10 years ago, it is what it is. Enjoy the journey. It's not going to be quick. But if you rush it, you're going to miss all the little golden nuggets along the way. Um, Sometimes the nuggets aren't fun, but you can always learn something from them. But I've definitely learned to slow down and appreciate what's happening in the now. So that's definitely what's different about me from then. Good things take time also.
And was writing your story part of that?
Eventually, yes, because it took me 10 years to get to the point where I felt like I could share. Hmm.
Well, thank you so much.
Hmm.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. Michelle's going to have all of her reach out resources posted with her podcast. And we just really appreciate that you took the time to spend listening to who she is and getting to know her better as an author because it is official. She has turned everything in, and now she just gets to have fun and enjoy the rest of this part of the journey. And we will be releasing the book April 22nd. We went with an Earth Day release. We felt like that was really appropriate as the rising comes out of the soil, the messiness, the dirt, the
Mm.
all of that. And so every aspect of the cover and the book and the chapters and everything else was really intentional. So thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to hearing how you love this book. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.